Who in heaven are we? Why on earth are we here? And how to make sense of this mess of our humanness and perhaps even transition it. Welcome, everyone. From whatever nation state or emotional state you might be in, Dawn of an Era of Well-Being is the place to tune in. We're going to deep dive into uplift with insight. And I can't wait to introduce you to two formidable hosts, two-time Nobel nominee and founder of the Laszlo Institute of New Paradigm Research and the Club of Budapest, Professor Ervin Laszlo, and a fourth-generation family business entrepreneur who is the founder of ITEA Institute Quantum Leadership Center, Fred Tsao. Quantum. Now, there's a word to deep dive into, but before we do, I want to acknowledge our worldwide audience. For some, these are indeed remarkable times in the best sense, but for most, it is quite challenging. Dawn of an Era of Well-Being podcast and the book hopes to offer real comfort to the global community. Yet for many, comfort comes in the form of that which is concrete, action-oriented, tangible. So I'd like to start with two words that feel actually ethereal and see if we can bring forth the real in ethereal. The word consciousness and the word new paradigm. Ervin, you are the forefather, if you will, of consciousness and talking about the new paradigm. So I'd like you to talk to us about these quantum notions and why we should be excited about them and even hopeful.
Well, consciousness is the key. But doesn't have to be a forefather for that. I mean, there have been very great forefathers. Schrödinger, among other things, among other people, said you can't get beyond consciousness. Wherever you go, whatever you look at, there is always consciousness. That starts, that's the base. No, but there's a big difference between the old paradigm consciousness and the new paradigm consciousness. The old paradigm is that it's a byproduct. It's a kind of a corollary, secondary effect of the workings of neurons in the brain. If these neurons stop, the consciousness stops, and that's supposed to have been said to be the proof of the pudding, that particular eating, you see. But now it turns out that consciousness doesn't have to necessarily stop when the brain stops. We know that from near-death experiences, we know that now from many altered state experiences. There's an entirely new concept of consciousness, which is also a very old concept because it has been known to Plato and known to the Hindu seers. Consciousness is not something local that is just produced here. The standard notion is consciousness is this like something that's generated, like a turbine moving around generates electricity. Neurons working in the brain in sequence generate consciousness. That's the old notion. But the new notion is very, very different. The new old notion because it's the ancient as well. Consciousness is something that exists in the world. This world, in a larger sense, is consciousness, not just has consciousness. It's not a mechanistic material world. It's a world that is sensitive, a world that is alive in a special sense, the sense of being able to respond, to perceive and to respond. All its parts are connected. The new concept of consciousness has a role for the brain. The brain is a transformer, a transmitter of consciousness, not the creator of consciousness. But how we see the world depends on our brain. How we can transmit this tremendous cosmic consciousness which is there in the world. It's up to us. Our brain can transmit it, can bring it to us. We can become aware of the world. That's the unique advantage of being a human being. We can be aware of our own consciousness. And hopefully we can let our consciousness guide our steps. Our consciousness is not arbitrary, not something that happens to us more or less by chance. Our consciousness is an element in the world. If you recognize this, if you act with it, go with it, that's the new idea of quantum consciousness. then we go with the quantum world's idea of consciousness, that we are all one, we are all belong together, we can all evolve together. That's the message that we want to carry out, carry forward, bring forward in this new book.
Fred, would you like to add to that why you are also so hopeful and excited about the idea of consciousness, of a conscious community, global community, and what we're calling now a new paradigm?
I'm not excited about it at all. It is just is. So I don't know how to answer your question. I'm not excited about it. It is just is. Actually, if you're not conscious, do you exist? You don't. You exist because you are consciousness. We are nothing more than consciousness. The metaverse, the megaverse that we created for ourselves, the holographic reality comes from consciousness interacting with energy, clustering of energy. Now in your meditating state, you can feel it because slowly your sensory starts retracting as you relax and move inward. And then you start feeling your buzz of energy. And then you don't even become energy. You're just consciousness. I can't explain. Go home and practice meditation. You will experience consciousness because this is us. This is our fundamental. This is who we are. To explain consciousness, no need. We are it. We know it. So don't lie to ourselves, our experience. There's all this definition people want to define. But we cannot define. We cannot define what is holistic or holism. We cannot define it is not a thing. As the Tao Te Ching says, the Tao that you can call the Tao is not the Tao. And when you name something, you define it. This is the mother of all things. You define, it becomes a thing. But what if it's not a thing? It's not Taiji, it's Wuji. You can't define it, but you can certainly experience it.
What I'm hearing from both of you is a very compelling dialogue. It sounds almost like a duel between resistance and relief. Relief in the sense that the world has finally an opportunity to see itself from a much more expansive and depthful perspective, one that offers a kind of hope for the constrictions that we've been living under for epochs and the way we perceived ourselves in a very limited context. But resistance in the sense that in any transition, people resist change. It's an understandable, maybe innate attribute of the human condition. And so there is great resistance to going through this transition because there's such upheaval. It upends everything that we've come to identify ourselves with. So I want to ask you both to speak, to address the relief versus resistance, and one other thing, which is related, which is that once upon a time, the West successfully marketed itself to the East, now to, we could say, the detriment of nature and harmonious well-being. And there are so many important cultures whose rich traditional wisdom is relevant for today's troubled world. So why, in particular, the Chinese culture? What does it offer the West? And how to, if you will, market the East to the West on behalf of the very best, the new paradigm, and the relief versus the resistance. Would you like to both discuss that?
Well, yes, let's segment it into two questions. One I'll answer, and the other one I'll ask Fred to deal with. The one for me is relief versus resistance, and then Fred can talk about the contribution of the Chinese culture. My saying is, my insight is, there will be no relief as long as there is resistance. The precondition of relief is the weakening and ultimately the elimination of resistance. Now, what do we mean by that? Relief from what? Resistance to what? Relief from the enormous problems, challenges, actually threats that we now face in the world. We have created an unsustainable world that we're beginning to see and feel as being unsustainable. We're beginning to know that it doesn't go on like this. We're going to create more and more poverty, more and more suffering, more and more marginalization, more and more destroying of the detriment to the environment. We are creating a world in which 7.8 billion people, if that's roughly what we are today, cannot live in peace and harmony. So we need relief from something very real, but a relief not psychological, not just simply to talk ourselves into that everything is better. Relief in the sense of facing the problems that we are now confronting, tackling them, and getting together harmoniously, collaboratively, working together. That's the only way to get relief, the way forward, the way to life, to survival, and eventually to thriving is through collaboration, through coordination of our actions. And that is rooted in consciousness. And the new consciousness, which tells us that we are one, that we all belong together, we can evolve together, or we become extinct together. This is the major big question that we have today. I would just like to add that I see some light at the end of the tunnel, because this is a time when resistance is being questioned. Is it wise to resist? Is it something that we even want and can do? Are we not better off opening not to chaos, but opening to change, opening to a better world? This is the way forward, to find the way in which we can live with each other, through each other, I would say. That is the great contribution of the Chinese tradition, I believe, that Fred will tell us and has been telling us. And that is what we are rediscovering in the quantum sciences. We are not separate individuals. As Einstein said, separateness is an illusion. We are basically one. We have to rediscover our oneness. Then we won't need to have relief, because we will be relieved. We will find what we truly are. That is the message that we want to convey here, I believe. There is a way to an era of well-being. The way is togetherness, oneness, and thriving as one family on this small and precious planet.
Fred, would you like to add to that? It's very, very profound what Ervin has said.
East selling West, West selling East. It's a separation. You don't have to sell anything or market anything. People automatically already know. All you need to do is just be you and follow your own calling. Right? So look at me. I don't know if I'm East or I'm West. In this new 21st century, I'm just human. You know, my grandfather is Brazilian. My great-grandfather is Chinese. My father's Malaysian. I'm Thai. My wife is Japanese. And that's just the concept. Nation is just a concept. You know, the human DNA difference is so narrow that even the chimpanzee has more DNA difference. We are so much more alike, and yet we want to look at differences. So East and West and North and South and white and black. And I think in the 21st century, we have to awaken that we're all in a journey with the same destiny of creating humanity in this holistic system called life.
We know, well, it's interesting that you bring up the word leadership, because we know that leadership has almost become a dirty word. It's got such a negative connotation right now. And it's almost as if what you're saying, Fred, is extension versus extinction, that we're now, it's almost like another duality. We're now being given the opportunity, once again, to re-perceive ourselves in a much more extended means that will prolong the human species, but in a whole different trajectory, a much more sustainable and caring human species of the future. But there's something that I want actually to address to both of you, but I think it has to do with the notion of oneness, and family, the word family. We're a global family. We understand that conceptually, but we know that in the West right now, the concept of family is, in other words, very strong in the Asian cultures, but it's very fractured in the West, and particularly, I would say, in the U.S. And a sense of unity-based family values is becoming imperative in building this new paradigm. So how can the East influence the West in overcoming these deeply etched rifts that now characterize this deep fracture? And it's not just the U.S. We see it through leadership. We see I would say the pendulum swing, the rebound almost to the sense of a global family in, can we say, authoritarian orientation or very nationalistic movements that become much more tribal and go almost in the opposite direction of what the new paradigm is encouraging and what's trying to birth at the same time. Ervin, Fred, who would like to dive into that?
Well, just let's sort of alter it. I'll say a few words, then we hand it over to Fred. Alison, I think the idea of family has been taken over roughly as an idea of a reproductive unit. But we need to have a much more extended concept of family. I would like to use the notion instead of community, a community in which all members are members of one large family, overarching family. We can talk about a community in a neighborhood, west side of New York, Manhattan, for example. That can be a community. We can have a West Side Story. We can have a community of all cultures. We can have a community of life on Earth. So from the very small detail to the very largest, we are people, we are communal people. Aristotle said that we are social beings, but social beings in a larger sense. We have to learn to extend the notion of society, family, and community to the planet. We cannot live in a world which is so interdependent and so interconnected that as our world is, we cannot live in such a world unless we discover that we are all part of a larger unit. This is a discovery that is in us, that it can be made by descending into our own deepest being, into our own psyche, into our own consciousness. Because deep down we know that we are not alone. We are not against anybody. There are no strangers, cannot be, not to strive, not if we are to strive, to first survive and to strive. There can be no strangers in the human community. There can be no strangers in the web of life. We are all belonging to the same system, the Gaia system, if you like, a system of life of which you are a part. So all the new paradigm that we're talking about, the paradigm of a social market economy, the paradigm of a new kind of capitalism, the paradigm of people, of a new income distribution, and a new way of dealing with the environment. All of this calls for, requires, uneliminably requires, that we consider ourselves members of the same community, the community of life on Earth. It's an old insight, never has been so important as it is today, because the lack of this action on the basis of this insight is breaking apart our system. It's breaking apart the human community, the community of life on Earth. the worst possible consequences, extinction for humanity and for all higher forms of life. That is a possibility. It's not a necessity. It's up to us to move to another possibility, to recognize who we are. We are members of the same community, and to live accordingly. Then we can survive, then we can thrive. That, I think, is the lesson we have to learn, a lesson that is taught to us by observation of the problems that arise, of the unsustainability, of the crisis in which we are living, and it is supported now. The solution is now supported by the quantum sciences, as Fred is saying and as we are saying in this book.
Fred, this is big concept. And again, before you respond, I would just like to say that these are concepts that are so fundamental to our survival and that of so many other species. And they are concepts. And I very much want to know how we go from conceptuality to experientiality without further crises, because we know this wisdom has been around since forever. You know, the ancients have spoken about this in so many different cultures, and yet here we are again at the precipice, and perhaps this time like no other time in the entirety of civilization. So Fred, what's going to be the difference this time as opposed to all the other times in history where maybe we came close and the wisdom of the ancients was ever present, but we somehow didn't make that evolutionary leap? What's going to do it for us this time, do you think?
Nobody runs the era of materialism and separation. This East and West is an illusional concept that we separate ourselves, as I said. We all have the same ethical challenge, the same sustainable world. We all need to change. We're on a different path of changing and dealing with this ethical issue, this stress that stress the earth, that stress everything into ourselves. We don't run away because it's one system. The energy is one. The whole earth is one. When humanity is suffering, the whole humanity is suffering from the same energy, humanity energy. So we have to get out of this separation thinking of East and West and start thinking about humanity as one. And life is where humanity sits.
Would that it were so simple, because how many people would probably love to just relax into being themselves. But when we have a system, a grid in place that is almost gridlocked human beings from having the freedom, and we know there are certain countries that literally suppress that freedom, and how practically can a human being start to open up to their truth, their true self, amidst what feels like a clamp, pressing in, almost saying to us the very opposite. In other words, there are certain cultures, certain mores that say, no, you must not be an individual. You must not be your true self. And yet we know that there's something pulsing below the surface. So how can we practically help people to start to unearth, unfold, wipe away what's hiding, that beautiful fresco, that true self that's just waiting to be seen? Ervin, have you any thoughts on this?
Well, many thoughts, but not all of them can be expressed in a few words. But let me say a few words anyway. Churchill said that democracy is the worst form of government except for the alternatives. Thomas Jefferson said, in democracy, it's the people who lead. But if we believe that the people are not informed enough to lead, the solution is not to take the power from them, the power to lead, but to inform them. I think this is my notion of leadership. Leadership is to produce that background, essential background of information, of wisdom that people need to govern, to lead. It's the people who lead. Leaders need to enable the people to lead. If people who are uninformed lead, it's a catastrophe. And that's largely what we are experiencing today. We need an informed population. This doesn't mean everybody getting wise all at once. It means a critical mass, wising up, so to speak. A critical mass that can spread, that can influence the rest. At a time of chaos, impending chaos, and partially already arrived chaos, already achieved chaos, the critical mass is not a large mass. Butterfly effect surface. Small people, small groups of people can change the world. As Margaret Mead said, nothing else ever has. Let's create that critical mass. Critical mass is the help of Western scientific insight, practical insight, these Eastern traditional insights, putting it together so people can start thinking differently and then acting differently. That's contagious. That's more contagious than any Delta variant of COVID-19. That could spread because we need it. The time is ripe. The time is here to change. The alternative to change is to leave the stage of history. We don't need to do that. We can change, and we can change it by putting our best values, best insights together, creating the critical mass, which can spread and create a new world.
Beautifully said. I think what I'd like to do at this very poignant jumping off point is just ask both of you one final question for now, because I already love this concept of spreading this virally. We don't need more contagions and catastrophes and so forth. Perhaps there is something new that can really spread virally in the best sense. But I just want to ask both of you on a somewhat lighter note, if both of you were tourist ambassadors for planet Earth to the rest of the cosmos, and you had to market, let's say, humanity to another planet, what would you say is our selling point here on Earth, and in particular humanity's selling point? Fred, how would you be a tourist ambassador for planet Earth at this very pivotal juncture?
Very simple. Shift your consciousness, change your mind, change your habit, change yourself and the world will change around you. You just listen to it and see if your soul resonates to what I say, because the soul will resonate and you wouldn't know. Just have to listen to yourself. And if you found that your soul resonates and you want to explore life more deeply, that's great. I'm just calling on all people to truly step back, especially in COVID period, to think about what is well-being, what does our soul wants, what is life, because the future is now. We have to choose. This is the great opportunity, a wake-up call from the COVID, to choose a new way of living and a new way of seeing and a new way of life, to find our own calling.
I agree with Fred. I would like to be able to say that humanity on this small planet has woken up in time and has become what it was meant to become, an ambassador of consciousness, of higher consciousness that can pervade this whole planet, that can allow all life to flourish. I would like to be able to say that. But I have to say that for now, we are on the point where we may be awakening, or maybe we are going down. At this point, we don't know. It hasn't been decided yet. But I would like to say that we have the potential to awaken, to know who we are, to know that we are part of a whole that evolves, a whole that is conscious. And this higher consciousness, which is surely the destiny of all life, it is meant, all life is meant to create a higher consciousness. I don't see what else life could mean in the universe. But that I'd like to say that we are able to realize this, to understand it, and to act in accordance with it. I would like to say that we have the potential to do so. And allow me to come back next year, so to speak, and tell you that perhaps we have set out on the right way.
Oh, I can't thank both of you enough for this truly compelling, rich conversation, which is just the first of many. We're going to be having Ervin and Fred with several guest speakers in the coming episodes. And I'm Alison Goldwyn, your moderator for this wonderful, insightful Dawn of an Era of Well-Being podcast series, inviting you to join us again and to buy the book, of course, to dive gently into yourself, to your truth, and to remember that when we're building a new paradigm for humankind, let's try to include human kindness. Stay tuned and stay attuned.